You know what gets me every single year? By mid-July, I'm standing in front of my tomato plants watching beetles strip leaves faster than I can spray them. My peppers are sitting there half the size they should be, and my leafy greens, gone, completely gone, chewed to nothing. 15 years I did what everyone does. I tilled the soil every spring, replanted the same crops in the same spots, and when the problems showed up, I sprayed. Insecticide for beetles, fungicide for mildew, repeat. It worked fine, I got vegetables, but I was always fighting, always reacting, always losing half my potential harvest to pests and disease before I even got a single tomato in the kitchen. Then I spent 3 days in Lancaster County watching an Amish farming operation, and I noticed something that changed everything. Their gardens looked fundamentally different. Same climate as mine, same season, same pests in the region, but their plants, healthier, fuller, producing at a completely different scale. And here's the thing that really stuck with me. The farmer walked past his beds multiple times a day, barely stopping. No spraying, no panicking, just plants thriving. I'm standing there looking at rows of heirloom tomatoes with barely a nibble on them, watching this farmer gesture casually at a freshly planted section of brassicas without any protective netting, and I'm thinking, what do they actually know that I completely missed? What's the system here? Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what they do, and it comes down to 3 specific crops and how you position them in your garden. By the end of this, you'll understand how to keep pests out without chemicals, how to pull consistent yields from the same beds year after year, and how to convert raw ground into production-ready soil in one season. Stick around to the end because I'm sharing the exact rotation sequence Samuel showed me. The one that breaks pest and disease cycles completely, plus the planting whole formula that Amish gardeners use for transplants, and a nitrogen-fixing technique using nothing but cover crop residue that eliminates the need for external inputs. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there's a guiding principle the Amish live by called Gelisenheit. It roughly translates to yielding to the natural order. It's not about being passive or weak. It's about working with systems instead of fighting against them. When an Amish farmer plants his garden, he's not thinking about controlling nature. He's thinking about cooperating with it. Every decision, what he plants, when he plants it, where it goes, is based on one question. How does this work with what nature is already doing here? That single shift in perspective is why their gardens produce 10 times more than suburban yards on the same amount of land. Now, I'm not here to preach philosophy or religion, but here's why this matters for your actual garden. When you spray pesticide on beetles, you're not just killing beetles. You're overriding the entire biological network underneath your soil. You're destroying the predatory insects that naturally hunt those beetles. You're killing the beneficial fungi that feed your plants. You're poisoning the mycorrhizal networks that connect your root systems to nutrient sources. Every time you till soil, you're fragmenting those networks. Every time you use monoculture, planting the same crop in the same spot, you're creating a buffet for pests and disease. You're working against the system instead of with it. The Amish figured this out through 400 years of observation. What modern soil science is now confirming is that your garden isn't just dirt and plants, it's a living ecosystem. And when you treat it that way, everything changes. Here's what the research shows. Scientists at Penn State and Michigan State have been studying soil biology for decades, and what they're finding completely validates what Amish farmers already knew. Mycorrhizal fungi. These are fungal networks that connect to plant roots. They increase nutrient uptake by up to 200%, but they only survive in undisturbed soil with living cover. The moment you till, you break them. The moment you spray fungicide, you kill them. Beneficial bacteria in the soil suppress disease-causing pathogens naturally. Predatory insects hunt pests. Decomposers break down organic matter into usable nutrients. It's not magic, it's just biology, and it's been happening in healthy soils for millions of years. The Amish aren't using any technology we don't have access to. They're just choosing to let these systems work instead of fighting them. Here's how it works at a biological level. When you leave crop residue in your beds instead of clearing it, decomposer organisms, bacteria, fungi, arthropods, break that material down into humus. That humus holds water. It holds nutrients. It creates structure in the soil. Mycorrhizal fungi colonize the roots of your plants and extend underground networks that can reach 10 times further than root hairs alone. Those fungi exchange water and nutrients for sugars that your plant produces. It's a trade. Both organisms benefit. When you plant diverse crops in rotation instead of monoculture, you're changing what's available for pests and disease to eat. A beetle that specialized on tomatoes finds nothing but beans. A fungal pathogen that attacks lettuce finds nothing but brassicas. The pest population crashes because there's no food source. Then, when you reintroduce the original crop a year later, the predatory insects that feed on those pests have already established themselves. They're waiting. The system is balanced. That's Jelisenheit thinking applied to gardening. The Amish don't use chemicals because they're trying to be pure or organic. They use crop rotation, cover crops, and biodiversity because those approaches work better than fighting the system. And here's the critical part. They're not using any technology we don't have access to. A cover crop is just a plant you grow and plow back in. Crop rotation is just planting different crops in different places. Companion planting is just choosing which crops go next to each other. They're choosing to observe the system, work with it, and let biology do the heavy lifting instead of buying products and spraying away the problem. That shift in thinking changed everything for me. When I stopped trying to control my garden and started trying to cooperate with it, the results were immediate. Fewer pests, healthier plants, bigger harvests. And here's what really got me. I didn't have to buy a single product. I just had to change how I was thinking about the system. Here's step one, and this is where the Amish approach really starts to look different from how most of us plant. When you look at a suburban garden, you see people digging a hole, dropping in a seedling, and moving on. But that's not what Samuel showed me. The planting hole itself, the actual foundation, that's where everything changes. This single step determines whether your transplant struggles for months or takes off immediately. Most of us dig a hole about the size of the root ball, plop the seedling in, and water it. But here's what we're actually doing. We're putting a delicate transplant into cold, compacted soil with no food and no biological support. The plant spends the first month just trying to recover from transplant shock. But when you prepare the planting hole the Amish way, with a specific blend of compost, mycorrhizal fungi, and soil structure, the transplant doesn't struggle. The roots immediately find nutrients. The fungi colonize instantly. The plant establishes in days instead of weeks. That's the difference between a plant that's surviving and a plant that's thriving from day one. First, dig your hole about 8 inches deep and 12 inches wide, roughly twice the size of your root ball. This matters because you're not just making space for roots. You're creating a biological zone where mycorrhizal colonization can happen. Make the bottom of the hole slightly raised like a little mound, so the roots sit on top of it. This prevents water from pooling and rotting the root collar. You want water to drain through, not collect. Next, fill the bottom 3 inches of that hole with what I call the establishment mix. Here's the exact formula Samuel uses. 2 parts finished compost, 1 part native soil from your bed, 1 part perlite or coarse sand for drainage. Mix it together right there in the hole. The timing is critical here. Do this no more than 15 minutes before you plant. You want the mixture fresh and moist, not dried out. And do it in spring or early fall, never in peak summer heat. Your transplant needs time to establish before temperature stress hits. Once you've got that base layer in, set your transplant on top of it. The root ball should sit so the soil line on the seedling is exactly at ground level, not buried, not elevated. This is non-negotiable. If you bury the stem, it rots. If you expose the roots, they dry out. Now, fill around the sides with your establishment mix, making sure to eliminate air gaps as you go. Pack it gently, not rock hard, but firm enough that there's no empty space. Mature leaves should be just barely above soil level. Space multiple transplants 18-24 inches apart so mature foliage will eventually touch, creating a living canopy that suppresses weeds. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They either bury the transplant too deep, thinking deeper equals more stable, or they don't pack the soil around it, leaving air gaps. If you bury the stem, the soil touching the buried section traps moisture and causes fungal rot. The plant dies from the base up. If you leave air gaps, the roots can't establish contact with the soil, and you're back to weeks of transplant shock instead. Soil line at ground level, elimination of air gaps, gentle but firm packing. That's it. That's the difference. You'll know this is working when within 3-5 days you see new leaf emergence at the growth tip. The plant doesn't look sad or droopy. By 10 days, you should see white root tips emerging into the establishment mix. That's the mycorrhizal colonization happening. If your transplant is wilting or turning purple 3 weeks in, you buried it too deep or left air gaps. But if it's standing upright with new growth, your foundation was solid. To recap the exact measurements: hole depth, 8 inches hole width, 12 inches base layer establishment mix, 3 inches transplant spacing, 18-24 inches apart soil line, flush with ground level timing, spring or early fall, never peak summer. Verify by checking that soil just touches the stem, no higher. Once your transplants are established, and you'll know because they're actively growing with new leaves, you move to step 2, where you set up the support structure and microclimate that keeps them producing for the entire season. Let me share some patterns I've noticed over the years. Things I used to do the conventional way that the Amish approach handles completely differently. No judgment here. I did all of these for longer than I'd like to admit. The first pattern is reaching for spray at the first sign of a bug. You see one Japanese beetle on a leaf and your instinct is immediate. Grab the insecticide. Of a spot damage, panic slightly and spray within hours. It looks responsible. You're taking action. You're protecting your plants. But what you're actually doing is poisoning the entire ecosystem before the natural predators even show up. The problem is you're disrupting a system that was about to regulate itself. A Japanese beetle on your tomato attracts parasitic wasps within 24-48 hours. Those wasps lay eggs in the beetle. The beetle dies. Problem solved. But if you spray before those wasps arrive, you've killed them too. Now you've got no predator population, so the next beetle isn't controlled. You're locked into spraying every season. Amish approach is different. They see a beetle and they wait. They know the system responds before they intervene. They understand that a little damage is the signal that predators are coming. Damage is communication in the ecosystem. What that means practically is you apply pesticide maybe once or twice per season instead of 8 to 10 times. And by year 2, you're not spraying at all because the predator population is established and working for you. You're not managing pests anymore. You're managing the system that manages pests. The second pattern is monoculture planting. All your tomatoes in one section. All your peppers in another. All your brassicas in a third row. This looks efficient, it's organized, it's easy to water and harvest from one spot, but you've just created an all-you-can-eat buffet for pests and disease that specialize in those crops. Pest that feeds on tomatoes finds nothing but tomatoes. A fungal disease that attacks brassicas finds nothing but brassicas. You're concentrating their food source instead of dispersing it. By mid-season, you've got an explosion. Amish plant in diversity. Tomatoes here, then basil, then beans, then lettuce, then peppers. They're intentionally breaking up the target plant pattern. What that means practically is a beetle looking for tomatoes has to navigate through basil and beans first. A fungal pathogen looking for brassicas finds lettuce. The pest population stays lower because finding food is harder. And the diversity creates habitat for beneficial insects, so you've got predators and parasites scattered throughout, not concentrated in one problem area. The third pattern is keeping the garden spotless. You pull every leaf. You clear every bit of debris. Everything is tidy. Looks neat, which feels productive, but you're eliminating habitat. You're removing the places where beneficial insects overwinter and lay eggs. Ladybug that feeds on aphids needs somewhere to shelter in winter. A parasitic wasp needs a place to lay eggs. A decomposer organism needs organic matter to work with. When you clear everything, you're not just removing mess. You're removing the infrastructure that supports the beneficial population. Amish leave crop residue. They leave mulch. They leave some structure. They're building habitat intentionally. What that means practically is your beneficial insects don't disappear at the end of the season. They overwinter in the residue and mulch. Spring comes and they're already there. Your predator population doesn't crash and restart each year. It persists and builds. The fourth pattern is focusing on the plants and ignoring the soil until yields drop. You water the plants, you fertilize the plants, but you don't think much about what's happening underground. You manage the visible part, the leaf, the fruit, and assume the root system will figure itself out. It looks fine until suddenly in year 3 or 4 your yields tank. The problem is your soil biology is degrading. Every time you till, you're disrupting mycorrhizal networks. Every time you use synthetic fertilizer, you're feeding plants directly but starving soil microbes. By year 4, you've got dead soil. Now everything struggles. Amish feed the soil, not the plant. They add compost. They use cover crops. They minimize tillage. They understand that healthy soil grows healthy plants automatically. What that means practically is your soil gets better every year instead of worse. Your plants get more nutrients, not less. You're not fighting degradation, you're building regeneration. By year 3, you're seeing higher yields, not lower. The fifth pattern is replanting the same crop in the same spot season after season. Tomatoes in bed 1, peppers in bed 2 forever. It's convenient. You know where everything is, but you're accumulating pest and disease pressure in that specific location year after year. Soil-borne pathogen that specialized on tomatoes overwinters in that spot. Next spring, your new tomatoes go in and boom, disease hits immediately. You've got years of pest pressure concentrated in one bed. Amish rotate crops. Tomatoes here this year, beans next year, brassicas the year after. They're breaking the cycle that pests depend on. What that means practically is your pest and disease pressure drops dramatically in year 2, and by year 3, it's nearly eliminated. You're not managing disease in established beds, you're preventing it from establishing in the first place. That's the power of rotation. None of these conventional approaches will ruin your garden. They're not wrong. They're just leaving production on the table. And once you shift to the system-based approach, you realize how much easier it is to work with biology than against it. Here's what the Amish figured out. It's not just that you rotate crops, it's which 3 crops you rotate in this exact order. Crop 1, tomatoes go first. They're nitrogen hungry, they produce the highest yield 40-60 per plant, and you plant them in spring in fresh, rich soil. But by August, tomato pests have built up in that bed. So you remove them. Crop 2, beans go second. They fix nitrogen back into the soil that tomatoes depleted. A tomato pest looking for tomato leaves finds nothing but beans. Pest population crashes. By late summer, beans die back and leave fertilizer for the next crop. Crop 3, brassicas go third. Broccoli, cabbage, kale. They're susceptible to completely different diseases than tomatoes. A pathogen that killed your tomatoes in May has nowhere to live on kale in September. Plus, brassicas prefer cool fall weather. You harvest through October. That's the rotation. Tomatoes right arrow, beans right arrow, brassicas. Each crop solves the problem the previous one left behind. Before I learned this system, here's what my garden looked like. I got maybe 30-40 tomatoes per plant if I was lucky. I needed huge amounts of garden space to produce anything meaningful. Half my fruit rotted on the ground because I didn't have a system to support it properly. And my soil stayed depleted. Every year I had to add more inputs just to keep it from getting worse. I was on a treadmill. Lots of work, mediocre results, and the soil getting tired. Early April. Bare soil beds being prepared late April. Seedlings transplanted using the establishment hole early May. First flowers appearing late May. Fruit swelling on vertical support June-July. Heavy production, consistent harvests August-September. Continued yields as later plantings mature October. Final harvests, plants still producing. This is what changed when I applied the system. From bare soil to consistent, abundant production across months. Now, here's what I'm actually seeing. I get 40-60 full-sized, fully ripe tomatoes on a single vertical column. 4 plants in 10 square feet yields me 80 pounds of tomatoes across the season. And my soil, it improves every single year instead of collapsing. That's not luck. That's the system working. Here's the exact progression so you know what to expect. Week 1-2, your transplants establish. You see new leaves emerging at the growth tip. The plant stops looking droopy and starts looking confident. This is the establishment mix working. Roots are making contact with the biology you created. Month 1, late May. Plants reach 12 inches tall. First flowers begin appearing. You can see the multiplication process happening. The plant is building structure and reproductive capacity. Month 3, late July, first harvests. The transformation is obvious. You've got fruit coming in regularly. The system stability is clear. This isn't a fluke. This is consistent production. Year 1, October. Complete yield picture. You're looking at 80 pounds from 10 square feet if you've got 4 plants. That's a real metric. That's what the system produces in the first year when everything is set up correctly. Me give you the actual numbers so you can plan. One well-pruned indeterminate tomato plant on a vertical stake in deeply enriched soil produces between 40 and 60 full-size tomatoes. 4 plants in 10 square feet gives you 160 to 240 tomatoes total across the season. That's roughly 80 pounds of tomatoes. If you succession plant, putting in new seedlings every 2 weeks from April through June, you extend that production from July all the way through October. You're not just getting a peak harvest in August. You're getting continuous supply for 4 months. On a 4x10-foot bed with proper rotation, you're looking at 8,100 pounds of tomatoes per year on just that one bed. My best year was 240 tomatoes from 4 plants. That was year 3 when my soil had been amended for multiple years, and I dialed in the pruning discipline. The Amish farmers I know consistently hit 50-60 tomatoes per plant as a baseline, some years higher. The difference between my year 1 numbers and their consistent numbers is simple. They've got decades of built-up soil biology, they're disciplined with pruning, and they've made multi-year investment in the beds. You can get there too. It just takes consistent application. Realistic first-year expectation. 40-50 tomatoes per plant if you follow the system exactly. Maybe 30-40 if you're learning as you go. Improve your technique each year and those numbers climb. By year 3, you're hitting 50-60 regularly. I'd rather you start with honest expectations and be pleasantly surprised than promise you 300 tomatoes and have you disappointed in August. That yield comes from applying the 3 specific crops in the right rotation sequence. Let me show you what those 3 crops are and exactly why they're the foundation of this entire system. If any of this changed how you think about pest control, if you're tired of fighting the same battles every season, if you want a garden that actually works with you instead of constantly against you, I'd really encourage you to check out the full implementation guide. This video gives you the philosophy and the patterns, but the real power is in the step-by-step demonstration of how to set up each crop, how to execute the rotation, and how to troubleshoot when things don't go according to plan. The guide walks you through the entire first season so you're not guessing. You can grab it linked in the description. It's free, no email required, just the system, fully laid out. If you want more of these deep dives into how traditional cultures approach the garden, if you're interested in how different communities have solved the same problems without fancy inputs, and you want practical wisdom from people who are actually doing this successfully year after year, hit subscribe. I drop new videos every single week. Tomato pruning techniques, soil building methods, cover crop strategies, succession planting timelines, all the tactical stuff that turns theory into actual harvest, and hit the bell so you get notified the moment a new video goes live. Don't miss it. Here's what I want to know from you. In the comments below, tell me, what's your biggest garden frustration right now? Is it pests? Is it soil that won't improve no matter what you do? Is it space trying to fit more production into a small area? Have you tried any of these crops before, and if so, what was your experience? Or maybe you've grown tomatoes vertically and you want to share what yield you got. I genuinely want to know what numbers you're hitting. Or you've used crop rotation and you've seen the difference. Tell me what changed for you. I read every single comment. Not just the first few, everyone. Your question might be the next video I make. If this changed how you think about your garden, if you found this valuable and you know someone who's been wanting to start gardening but feels completely overwhelmed by all the conflicting advice and inputs and complexity, please share this with them. Send them the link. Tell them there's a simpler way. Tell them the system works. Thanks for spending this time with me. genuinely. The fact that you're here, watching a deep dive about Amish gardening philosophy and practical systems, means you care about doing this right. I'll see you in the next one.